Did you notice that I messed my numbering up? That last problem says 52, but it should have said 50. 50. Should have said 50, not 52. Well, here's 51 anyways. Pretty much the same exact type of problem, slightly more advanced. We need to start with this absolute value inequality. We need to split it up into two inequalities. X minus 3 is less than 2, and x minus 3 is greater than negative 2. That's how you split up an absolute value inequality. Now just solve both of them. So add 3 in both inequalities to get x is less than 2 plus 3 is 5, and x is greater than negative 2 plus 3 is 1. So the significance of this is those two numbers, 5 and 1. These are the x values of interest. I want to make this thing continuous, which means I need to set negative 1/2 x minus 2 squared plus 5. I need to set that equal to my second branch, mx plus b. And where do we need these two functions to equal each other? We need to equal them at the two x values we just found. So at the x value of 5 and the x value of 1. So let's split this off into two separate equations. So negative 1/2 times 5 minus 2 squared plus 5 has to equal m times 5 plus b. And then a second equation is going to be negative 1/2 1 minus 2 squared plus 5 equals m times 1 plus b. And let's simplify these things. The left side is just a number. Figure out what it is. 5 minus 2 is 3. 3 squared is 9. 9 times negative 1/2 is negative 9/2. So I have negative 9/2 plus 5. Negative 9/2 plus 5 can be written as 10/2. So I have negative 9/2 and a positive 10/2, which means I'm left with a 1/2. 10 minus 9 is 1/2. Has to equal 5m plus b. Let's go over to our other equation, simplify that as well. 1 minus 2 is negative 1. Squared is positive 1. So that's just 1. So I get negative 1/2 plus 5 means I have, what do we want to write this as? So 5 minus 1/2 is 4.5. 4.5 is 9/2. So this equation just becomes 9/2 equals m plus b. And we need to combine this equation with that equation. So to do that, probably going to solve both of them for b. So b equals 1/2 minus 5m, and then b equals, in this equation, b equals 9/2 minus m. So we need to set 1/2 minus 5m equal to 9/2 minus m. So 1/2 minus 5m equals 9/2 minus m. So let's add 5m to both sides. So 1/2 equals 9/2 minus m plus 5m is plus 4m right there. Let's subtract 9/2 over 1/2 minus 9/2 is negative 8/2 equals 4m. And negative 8/2 is really just negative 4 equals 4m. And so divide by 4, m has to equal negative 1. Now what do we want to do with that? We want to also find b. And I have two equations here that tell me exactly what b is, assuming I know m. So let's plug this in to that equation right there. 9/2 minus m is negative 1, so minus negative 1 is really plus 1, has to equal our b. So 9/2 plus 1 is 11/2, because 1 is 2/2. 2 plus 9 is 11. So b is 11/2, and m is negative 1.